Howdy gamers! Video game compilations are really cool, but I usually only end up using them for one specific title. Super Mario 3D All-Stars, Mario Sunshine, Capcom Classics Collection, Ghouls and Ghosts, Sonic Gems Collection, Coaster. Oh shoot, this has Vector Man in it. And a game my lawyer told me not to talk about, but seeing as he isn't here...
Sonic R is the perfect Sonic racing game. Don't worry, last I checked I'm entitled to one bad opinion a month, so please just hear me out on this. Basically, up until Sonic R, the Sonic series was entirely 2D, except for the 3 times it wasn't, and I'd say they nailed Sonic's transition to 3D on their first, possibly 4th try. I'm not sure whether to count this as his first or 4th, since before they equated to a literal hub world, Sonic training for Smash, and oh god, oh frick, this is really hurting my eyes, turn it off. However, unlike the 3D games changing direction every time someone at Sega sneezed, the 2D games all kept one consistent theme. Unfair enemy placement. I mean, they all revolved around platforming and adventuring. That's why the perfect 3D Sonic game would be one that revolved around the platforming and adventuring the series was known for. And, oh, hey, they did that! But it's a racing game for the system that got replaced 4 years after coming out. Anyways, as I mentioned before, 2D Sonic games revolved around the idea of platforming and adventuring. And in case you doubted for a second that Sonic 1 was a platformer, Yuji Naka gave the player 3 buttons that all just jump. But it's not like that was the craziest thing ever. Garfield, Bubsy, and some other characters that weren't Orange Cats all had 2D platformers where you jumped. What made Sonic unique was the prominence of multiple pathways a player could take and an emphasis on speed. In Mario 1, the path that a speedrunner takes in a level will be almost the same as yours, just more optimized and with frame-perfect movements you need a degree and a PhD in biophysics to understand, whereas in Sonic 1, they might be taking a completely different route than you, because yeah, some routes are slower than others, but they all lead to the same place, and with practice, you'll be able to access the harder routes and blaze through the level. Sonic R takes the same approach to level design, which is freaking awesome. Some paths are easier to navigate than others, albeit slower, and the converse is also true, while other routes aren't even completely obvious to beginner player. This might sound weird at first if the only racing game you've ever played are the Mario Kart games, but there's a reason Sonic isn't in those games. Okay, isn't in most of the games, because just like how his platformers are different from Mario games, so are his racing games, and in my opinion, for the better. It might be controversial to say, but look how many Wii Wheels I have. Believe me, I like Mario Kart just as much as the next guy, but I can't deny how cool this is. To show you what I mean, a great microcosm of Sonic R's level design would be at the end of Resort Island. The path breaks off into 2 roads, and both are valid. The one on the right is quicker, so you might automatically think to go there. But on the other hand, the left path, while slightly longer, has more rings which you can use here for a speed boost later on. If you think you're good enough to be able to get enough rings elsewhere, you can just go to the right. But it can be hard to get rings, so you might need the extra ones the left provides. However, after experimenting with the track for a bit, you'll realize that there's a 3rd path that's faster than all of them. Just freaking jump through the trees. This is what makes Sonic R so good. Not only are there multiple paths to take, you can also just make your own path and give a giant frick you to God. This game might as well have been called Sonic Adventure because there are no rules, except for the invisible walls. They do enforce rules and can be pretty annoying at times, but hopefully you can see why I love the track design of this game compared to something like Mario Kart. There are always improvements to make and new paths to find, consistently giving you a reason to play. The more time you put in and the better you get, it becomes more and more fun. Each time I play, I'll find something about a stage that I didn't know, or a new way to use a character's special move to my advantage. It's all just a blast, and soon you'll realize this game really isn't a race against the computers, it's a race against the clock. I guess that could be seen as a bad thing though, because yeah, the computer controlled racers are really incompetent. They aren't a challenge when you're just doing a race, and on top of that, they never interact with you outside of Eggman trying to commit vehicular manslaughter, but even then, his rockets don't mess you up, so you're essentially on your own. At least, if you're playing normally. Sonic R, on top of having better tracks than Mario Kart, also just has an entire campaign mode, which they did in Mario Kart DS, but this has a robot with a gun, so it's better. As for the core part of the campaign, it's a lot of fun. You have to race through the 4 maps, collecting all of the Chaos Emeralds while coming in first. Additionally, the game has hidden unlockable characters that you can get by collecting the 5 Sonic coins and coming in top 3. I gotta be honest, this game does the collectathon platformer a lot better than Sonic 3D Blast, and in case you didn't notice by now, it's literally a racing game. I say that primarily because the levels in this game are actually fun to explore. As I mentioned earlier, there are so many different paths to take, and when playing through this game for the first time, the campaign mode helps encourage this exploration by having you find the coins and emeralds. It gets you accustomed to the track layouts, and will even help you find some shortcuts along the way. As for complaints about collecting the coins, some people will say it's dumb that the character coins and Chaos Emeralds are sometimes completely out of the way on paths you never go on, but I don't like that mentality. You have to appreciate everything that Sonic R did for gaming. It gave us Metal Knuckles.
Who?
To be fair, I do sort of see where this complaining about some of the collectibles is coming from. As an example, there's this one path on Resort Island by the ocean that's completely out of the way, and in any other mode you'd just never go on it. But the reason why it's there is because it's a coin location in the campaign mode. I do think it's weird to have part of the track you'll literally never use except for one time, but its existence also isn't harming anyone or ruining the experience in any way, so it feels like nitpicking at that point. When racing normally, worst case scenario, it becomes a background detail you can jump on. Plus, collectibles that are out of the way, while maybe weird to some people, do make it a lot more fun. It would be so boring to get and find all the collectibles if they were just on the main path while playing. But by putting some of them in spaces that are inconvenient, it becomes harder to get all of them and still come in first or third. This also adds huge replay value for the campaign mode, where you can try to get all the coins and emeralds at the same time, which is hard since you have to do all that while coming in first. It would require a huge understanding of the map and a lot of practice, acting as another good reason to come back to the game. Furthermore, if you are worried about the collectibles being too hard to find, don't be. For starters, the game is super helpful by including a coin counter in the bottom left so you won't lose track, and there are only 1 or 2 Chaos Emeralds per map, so they don't need a counter. As for actually finding them, they're not that hard while still fun to look for. A few coins per tracker on the main path or have a ring trail leading you to them, and for the harder ones, there's always the mini-map.
You ever say something and then immediately realize how stupid it is?
Okay, I get it. The minimap in this game isn't the best and looks like a game of Connect 4 gone wrong on some tracks, but it still works for finding paths you might have overlooked. The reason why it looks so bad is that for whatever reason it shows possible shortcuts, which, yeah, is dumb. It would be the same as showing these types of mushroom shortcuts on a Mario Kart map, but keep in mind this is the same company that released a 32-bit add-on for the Genesis alongside a brand new 32-bit console. They don't like logic. Anyways, with all this talk about me defending the coins to my dying breath, I don't think I've said what they actually do. After collecting the 5 coins and placing in top 3, you'll get a challenger approaching type thing, except it's a lot less exciting because it's Tails Doll instead of an obscure RPG character. You'll then have to race them one-on-one using the track you just got the coins for, which is a cool idea since you just mastered the area and probably have a better understanding of it than 0.01% of the population, but unfortunately, I do have some problems with this. It feels like the characters you face off against are completely random, not just in the casting, believe me, I'll get to that, but also why is Tails Doll in Radical City instead of Metal Sonic, or Metal Knuckles is in Reactive Factory instead of Egg Robo, while Metal Knuckles should have been not in the game. Or in Regal Ruins, I'm not a picky guy. I don't know too much about the Sonic lore. The only other one I've beaten was the game with the really stupid looking box art, so maybe they make sense if you've played the other games, but realistically it's more of a nitpick anyways. My real problem with these races lies on the CPUs of Sonic R. As mentioned earlier, they're bad. In the actual campaign mode, the races work because you're not just racing, you're also collecting and looking for things. However, if you're just racing them one-on-one like in these challenger approaching races, you'll always win, which kinda stinks because as a result these races are not very intense. It would be like in order to get a gold medal in the Olympics, you need to win a really hard race first, but then afterwards beat a toddler in another race just to prove you've earned it. A big reason why these computers aren't very good is because they almost never take advantage of their special abilities. For example, Metal Sonic can walk on water. Awesome. Good for him. Epic Jesus reference. But the computer never does it. If you're racing against them to unlock said character, it would have been a good idea to actually showcase what makes that character different. Not only would it make the races harder, but also would have made players more encouraged to try out someone new if they saw their abilities. Don't get me wrong though, I like the character abilities. In fact, I think it's another thing this game does better than Mario Kart. We're all epic pro gamers here, so it can be easy to forget, but a lot of people who play Mario Kart don't even know that there's an actual stat difference between characters. Don't believe me? Go down to your local retirement home and harass the elderly. If they understand what you're talking about, you'll probably get a response along the lines of, wait, the characters in Mario Kart differ more than just their looks? As a result, when playing Mario Kart, you probably have one character and one character only that you play. If you were neglected as a child, probably Baby Mario, or if you're cool, Yoshi. That's fine and all, but there's no reason to try out others unless you want to be a tryhard and play the best character. I guarantee you no one has ever selected to play Iggy Koopa in Mario Kart 8 on purpose. Because there's no reason to. Sonic R fixes this issue by making you want to play different characters thanks to their varying special abilities. The path I take on Radical City as Tails is completely different from the one I take as Amy. Unlocking a new character is so exciting since you get to try them out and see what makes them unique. The starting 4 characters in this game are a perfect example of this dynamic. Tails and Knuckles both have similar abilities with a glide/hover between them, but although Tails is faster on the ground, Knuckles' glide is faster than his hover. Meanwhile, Sonic's special ability is only a double jump, but he's the fastest of the 4. Amy is also there. She's the slowest and can't jump at all. Okay, I am underselling her a bit. She has a speed boost and she can drive on water, meaning she's a good beginner character, but Amy is clearly worse than the other 3. There are even some character coins that she literally can't get due to her lacking a jump, which just feels like an oversight. Between Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, yeah, pick whoever you want, but if we're hanging out and I see you select Amy, I'll lose all respect for you. This is where the cracks in Sonic R start to show. Sure, all the characters are pretty different, but some are just worse than others, making the game unbalanced in a multiplayer setting. There's no reason to ever play Eggman. Yeah, he does have a cool mustache, I'll give him that, but he's just bad. On top of that, there are some characters objectively better than everyone else in the game. If my friend tells me I can only pick between Knuckles, Tails, or Metal Knuckles, and me losing results in my copy of Boogie for the DS getting taken away, clearly I'm going to choose Metal Knuckles. I want to be able to play Boogie portably, and Metal Knuckles glides further than the other 2, is faster, and can literally just hover over water. To make things worse, it's not even like he's the best in the game. Super Sonic is just broken, and as long as you're trying to win, there's no reason not to choose him. I can sort of forgive him since he's a bonus for beating the campaign, but for the others, it's disappointing. I really wish there was better character balancing in this game because although there are 10 characters, when playing with friends you sort of have to agree to pick between Sonic, Tails, Tails Doll, and Knuckles. At the end of the day though, it's not the biggest deal since most Sonic R fans don't have friends and this only affects the balancing on the multiplayer side of things. When playing solo, it's fun to get through a track as quickly as possible, no matter who you are. Not to mention, the extreme differences like Amy's lack of a jump adds a fun challenge just figuring out new ways to use what's available. Even when playing against CPUs in the campaign mode, it's pretty balanced, because the game has a tier system where if you're a certain character, it'll match you with opponents that it deems of similar quality. This is obviously a giant red flag on how unbalanced the roster is that the game even has to do this, but it also does make sure that no matter who you're playing as, the campaign mode is fair. Despite Metal Knuckles being the second best in the game, I had a lot of trouble trying to get the 2 Chaos Emeralds as I'm on Reactive Factory because of the characters I was being matched against. Nonetheless, I do have one final complaint about the roster of Sonic R, which just comes down to, why is Metal Knuckles even here? Tails Doll, sure, he's become pretty iconic. I mean, he's in Minecraft, but I don't think I've ever heard anyone say Metal, followed by Knuckles. According to his wiki, he has appeared in a whole 2 games, Sonic R, and the video game compilation that contains Sonic R. Truthfully, this does actually sort of bother me. I'm not losing sleep over it, but it does stink that 1/5 of the characters were made up and Egg Robo is 1/10 of the cast. To me, spin-off should be a showcase of the series, so it could have been cool to have other people like Charmy the Bee, Vector, or Espio the Chameleon. Yes, I'm biased because I remember watching Sonic X when I was younger, but come on, those are way cooler than the Sonic equivalent of a Goomba. What if Espio could run along walls or Vector had the ability to do air dashes? Not only would those characters be improvements over Traveler Tales' very own Sonic OCs, but also more abilities that aren't just better versions of others would have been cool. The absence of the edgy chameleon and balancing aren't even my only complaints. As you might have noticed by now, there's a lack of content. Not in side modes, this game has more than Mario Kart in that aspect, but just in the number of tracks. You start out with 4, and as stated, I love the level design of them. They're perfectly fun tracks, and as a bonus, there are even references to zones from previous Sonic games, which is fun to see in a spin-off. However, only 4 courses just isn't enough no matter how well they're designed. Sure, Mario Kart 8 did get DLC that added more tracks over 7 years after the game launched, but something tells me that isn't going to happen here. Technically, there are 5 tracks, but we don't talk about the 5th. Okay, fine, I'll talk about the 5th. Radiant Emerald. You ever look at a family photo and immediately know who's adopted? Instead of being based off a stage from Sonic, it's just based off Rainbow Road, except you can't even fall off, so what's the point? It's the only course I would consider bad. It lacks what made the other courses in Sonic are unique and isn't very fun. Because of this, there are really only 4 courses, but at least there are the side modes I talked about. The most standard of them is Time Attack, where you try to get through 3 laps as fast as possible. It's just standard Sonic Art Racing, which I've already talked about why I find fun. Additionally, as mentioned before, there's multiplayer. Once again, since you can't really interact with other characters, it's essentially just a 2 to 4 player time trial. However, I think both of those are fun side modes to the campaign, but it's all downhill from there. There's Reverse Time Trials, which is racing through the tracks backwards, and this is definitely where you can see how rushed the game was. Don't get me wrong, I love the idea of reverse tracks being in the game. That being said, Nintendo put more effort into Super Mario 3D All-Stars than Traveler's Tales did in this mode. They made little to no changes to these tracks, making them a pain to navigate sometimes, occasionally glitchy, and even the arrows on the ground weren't changed to make it easier to tell where to go. The way I feel about the reverse tracks is the same way everyone else feels about the normal tracks. Plus, you can't even race against CPUs or friends on them. Unfortunately, this isn't even the worst of the bonus modes. That goes to Balloon Mode. You try to find 5 balloons as quickly as possible. The emphasis goes on try, because when I did this, the 5th balloon either did not exist or was as good at hiding as my dad, because I could not find it for the life of me. I'm not alone in this either. I think sometimes they just don't spawn, and the balloons are in different spots each time, so it's not even like it's something you can replay to get better at. Finally, to finish off the Triforce of pointless side modes, there's Tag. This is the best of the worst, where you just try to tag the other characters. It's not really any fun besides scaring the CPUs and watching them sometimes glitch out. I've never seen this happen in the normal races, only here, which is a fun reference to the game's rushed development. Honestly, outside of the side modes and the game having a small number of courses, I promise that this game doesn't feel unfinished. It has more personality than a lot of games that come out nowadays. Some people argue that the controls feel bad as a result of the game being rushed, and to that I say, dang it, I almost got done praising this game without mentioning its most controversial aspect. The controls seem to be people's biggest problem with the game, but other than a few hiccups, I have no problem with them. The worst part is no reverse button, because there are a few times you might run into a wall breaking all momentum, meaning you have to awkwardly turn around. However, other than this, I don't see what's wrong with them. There's a button to brake and drift, so while some turns can be difficult, mainly on Regal Ruins, they're all manageable. It's essentially Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but the only option is 200cc, which makes sense since this is a Sonic racing game. I think the reason people don't like the controls is because the characters control like a car, not a Tails. But to me, that makes sense since this is a racing game. It would feel weird if he controlled like an average third-person game, but just really fast. Once you accept the fact that Sonic is in fact a car, the game is great. Unfortunately, the game at times definitely treats you like you're not a car with a Sonic skin suit, which is dumb, but only for a few character coins in the campaign mode. When racing normally through time trials, it's not an issue outside of the few aforementioned turns on Regal Ruins. Even with that in mind, I can still forgive Regal Ruins since it has an amazing song to accompany it. Actually, all the songs in Sonic are amazing. They have fast tempos which works perfectly for a Sonic racing game and sound amazing. I'm not sure whether I like the songs in this game ironically or not, and at this point I'm too scared to ask myself, but I enjoy them nonetheless, and the only real critique I could see against the soundtrack is that the lyrics themselves sometimes don't fit the theme of racing, which fair enough I guess? I don't know, I feel like that's a dumb thing to say considering you can turn off lyrics, and at the very least a song describing a racetrack is still somewhat about racing. The songs in Tony Hawk are now people singing about skateboarding and people praise the music in those games, so I don't get the difference. They still sound good, which is what matters, and realistically, the soundtrack of a game doesn't matter too much, but when I have an opportunity to talk about the Sonic R soundtrack, I'm gonna talk about the Sonic R soundtrack. Sort of like the weather in this game. I promise I'm almost done here, but having randomized weather and time of day in a racing game, that's kinda cool. The time of day doesn't really matter, but the weather actually does, sometimes completely changing how something is played. When it's snowing, the water freezes over, making it so anyone can run on it, which sure, for Rainbow Road, I mean Radiant Emerald, it doesn't matter, but it definitely does on something like Radical City. Even just the time of day is cool to see changing and makes me wish Mario Kart would do it. However, if you just really hate sunsets, you can make it so it's always nighttime in the settings and vice versa.
Sonic Gems Collection is really cool, specifically the part where Sonic R is in it. I'm not even a racing game fan or a Sonic fan, but I still love this title so much. That's why to give it a score of 100, I'd give it a 93 out of 100. The tracks are amazing. This is the only game where I'd actually consider doing time trials to be fun, and I'm pretty sure Jesus Christ himself composed the soundtrack. That's why to give this game an award, I'd give it the Best Sonic Game award. If I ended up convincing you to play Sonic R, I highly recommend you do so on the Sonic Gems Collection version. Not only because it makes for a good coaster, but also all the improvements it made over the original. That's not even to mention how expensive the Sega Saturn version is. It's really interesting too because the game launched at $50, but nowadays it's going for upwards of $300. The reason behind that is actually really interesting, but I don't have time to go into it at all. So if you want to learn more, you can just look up Sonic inflation on Google. But until next time, remember to stay safe and that I love you guys.